So, John, first of all, I want to thank you for joining me here at my studio.
I
need you to come up.
Joining me here at my studio.
There we
Thank
go. Am I good?
Yeah, you're fine.
Okay, good.
Okay, so
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, exactly. We here at Crooked are really thankful for all the guests we can have come along. Just to get right to it, today President Obama came back.
He did.
And as many people would believe he was in a Messiah-like return, one of the first things he said was, "Do not expect a Messiah."
Yes.
Now, what do you think that says to all of the Beto O'Rourke fans who say this is our Messiah?
It's interesting. Like Obama's sort of been on this kick for a while about. I mean, it sort of goes back to what he said when he started running for president, which, a big part of his message, even from his first announcement speech, was this campaign can't just be about me. It has to be about you. It has to be about what you can do for this country, about, reviving civic participation, political participation, getting involved. And the only way that this will work and that will actually bring about the change that we're talking about is not just if you vote for me, send me to the White House, and then I'll fix everything. It will only work if you're involved and you're working every single day. And look, I think over 8 years of the presidency, a lot of people sort of lost that perspective and thought, okay, well, I was excited about Barack Obama, I voted for him, and now I can go back to my life, and he'll go solve everything. And we know from Trump being elected, and also all the things we didn't get done over 8 years, and the fact that, young people didn't turn out in 2010 and 2014, and we got a Republican Congress, and so we didn't get a lot done after that.
2014 was a pretty rough year for turnout.
It was awful.
Pretty sure it was the lowest since World War II.
It was. Yeah, he mentioned that in the speech today. Oh. And so I think his message in this election is you've got to vote, everyone's got to get involved. And I actually think for all the attention that Beto's getting, and whatever comparisons to Obama or, some kind of inspiring figure, he has that same message. Like, I've heard Beto say the same thing. Sure. It is about people getting involved.
You and I are Beto hipsters in the sense that we were actually talking about Beto before he was cool.
Yes, we were there early.
That conversation before the Now This video made him the talk of the town.
We were there way back when.
Exactly, and I hope he recognizes us as some of his truest friends. But in regards to 8 years with President Obama and his message of let's all come together and do this as a country,
right.
I want to go back to the Obama campaign.
Sure.
What was it like getting involved with that in the beginning?
It was the best professional experience I've ever had in my life and probably will ever have. I graduated college, I worked on the Kerry campaign, and I was, 21 at the time, and I loved the Kerry campaign because I wanted to be in politics, and I wanted to join a campaign, and it was exciting, and it was also crushing because we lost. We lost in a campaign where John Kerry's record was attacked unfairly, in our opinion, and the Bush campaign was really tough and nasty, and we had our own problems. There was 50 consultants running around trying to get John Kerry to do this and that and the other thing, and it was Washington-based, so we sort of had the worst of Washington you experience the longer that you're in that city. And so I was very cynical after the Kerry campaign. I loved John Kerry, I loved the chance I had to be on that campaign, but I was cynical about politics after that, and I went back home to Massachusetts. I moved back in with my parents at 22 years old, which wasn't exactly all that exciting.
I'm expecting to be somewhere around there when I'm 22, so...
Yeah, but it was weird. I was back in Massachusetts, and I said, okay, well, that's it. I'll go to law school like my parents wanted me to. And then I get a call from Robert Gibbs, who was Obama's press secretary. He had also been Kerry's press secretary and my boss, so he knew me, and he said, Obama's looking for a speechwriter. He's never used one before. But now that he's a U.S. senator, he's going to need to work with someone. And so I start this job with Obama in the Senate, and 2 years later, I get sent to Chicago for this campaign. And I believed in him so much. I had read Dreams from My Father. I had worked with him for 2 years in the Senate, that I was so inspired by him because I thought he was such an honest politician. I thought he spoke in a way that was really authentic, and that, he believed everything he was saying. And that experience of being on that campaign in Chicago with a whole bunch of other people who are my age, and watching everyone become inspired by the possibilities of this campaign and what Barack Obama might do as president, and sort of watching the country sort of like people all over the place who'd never been involved in politics before starting to say, okay, I think I want to get involved, I want to take a chance, I want to be part of this campaign, not just because I like Barack Obama, because it feels like a movement. It was this sort of special moment that I don't know that I'll ever be able to capture again.
And how did that campaign go?
That, you know what, it went pretty well.
Yeah?
It went pretty well.
Okay, great.
But it was funny, like we, looking back, it's like, oh yeah, it was inevitable. Of course Barack Obama wins. We were down 15, 20 points to Hillary Clinton in the national polls, most of that campaign. We were somewhat closer in Iowa, but for most of that primary campaign, and at least until the fall of 2007, we were behind, and it was a slog. And we thought that, Barack Obama is this national star, and he's getting a lot of attention, but maybe it won't translate into actual votes.
In the numbers.
Yeah, it won't show in the numbers.
I was actually really depressed about that. I was 6 years old, and I was looking at the polls, and I said,
This isn't gonna
exactly.
happen.
This isn't gonna turn out the way I want it to. But alas, we are out of the age of President Obama.
We are. I've noticed that.
We are in a different time, and now that we have this presidency that is that embraces a president that so often ignores precedent, tell me, if you had to, and everybody says this is why Trump won. This is why Trump won. Here's a million reasons. If you had to pinpoint it to one primary reason, what do you think that is?
It's tough. I actually don't think there is one primary reason. That's not a cop-out. I really do think there was a sort of a perfect storm of factors that came together. But I do think that 8 years of Obama and the president's approval rating is pretty decent, above 50%, but it had been in the mid-40s for a while. So there's people generally like Barack Obama. He pulled the country out of recession. And yet, even after 8 years in office, he doesn't reverse 40 years of trends that heighten inequality in this country. Right? And, part of the reason he doesn't do that is because he only has 8 years in office, and this has been going on for decades. Another reason is people didn't turn out as much in 2010 and 2014. We faced a Republican Congress who wouldn't let us do anything. So after the Recovery Act, after the Affordable Care Act, there's no big domestic legislation to sort of improve the economy that Obama can get passed. So you have a lot of people at the end of Obama's 2 terms who, like Obama, think that he tried really hard, and yet they're still struggling in their own lives. So you have those people. You also have people who, especially conservative people and Republicans, who there is a backlash to the fact that an African-American president wins. And I do think there was a racial backlash that I think at the time when we were in the White House, we probably discounted a little too much how much race played into it.
I think the difficult thing about embracing racial backlash behind a president is that so many people will say that it was not racial. That's not why they didn't like Obama. And they might very well believe that. And it's something that you can't really put a number behind. You can't say this percent of people didn't vote for Obama because they're racist, and this percent of people. But it's a deep-seated issue.
It is, and you're right. Like, you can never fully know what is in people's minds and their hearts. And I think that the way that race intersects with culture, intersects with economic concerns, if anyone tells you they have it exactly figured out, they're not being honest, because I don't think we know exactly how it goes, but we know that there are a bunch of different factors. And so I think there's some people voted for Donald Trump despite sort of his racist comments, his xenophobic comments, because they thought maybe he's kidding, maybe he misspoke, maybe he's just doing this for show.
Maybe he didn't care.
There's some that voted despite it, and there's some who thought, yeah, no, I like what he's actually saying.
Yeah.
I like what he has to say. So I think he got votes from both. Either way, you're voting for someone who uttered a bunch of racist comments, but your motivation for that can be different.
Sure, and right now Trump's approval rating among Republicans is actually soaring, which is incredibly surprising to me because President Trump has governed a lot more conservatively than a lot of people expected, which for people who are conservatives is certainly good news, and for people who are not, it is different.
Right.
But I got to ask you, we've got 2 more years with President Trump, assuming that everything doesn't play out the way some of us might have been expecting to, especially when that big Cohen-Manafort day happened. I'm sure we all remember where we were.
Right here.
Where the magical number 8 came about. And it makes you think, we've got 2 more years left. We've got an important midterm election in November, but past midterms, we are going to start looking into the presidential race.
Right.
A presidential race that is certainly going to be possibly more of a circus than the last one.
Yeah.
Because in the last race, you had Hillary Clinton, who represented what I believe is a lot of the system that a lot of people were sick of.
Yeah.
A lot of people who were voting against Hillary weren't voting as much against her specifically as they were what she represented, which was the system. She's I don't need to explain this to you.
No, and it's not just Hillary's fault too. I would say some people thought she represented a continuation of Obama, who, even though he was the outsider in 2008, by 2016, he was part of the establishment. She was a longtime part of the establishment. So was Bill Clinton. So, it seemed like it was continuity and not change.
Sure. Well, looking into 2020, the Democrats have a couple people that look like they're front runners for who they're going to put up.
Yeah.
We've got Cory Booker. We've got Senator Harris. We've got Elizabeth Warren. We've got, and this is the big one that I love talking about. We've got Avenatti, who is an interesting cat. And I just wanted to hear what you have to say about who we think the Democrats are going to have out there and who is really going to make their biggest splash in this coming election.
Yeah, a couple things. I think that the person who ultimately wins the nomination is going to have to distinguish him or herself from the rest of the pack in a pretty big way. I think people are looking for someone who doesn't seem too polished, too cautious, too scripted. I think, especially young people, right? I think that, I say we, I'm going to lump myself in with young people. I know,
chipper
I'm
young
fucking
lad.
old. But I think, from millennials on down,
That's appropriate.
everyone has sort of a finely honed bullshit detector
Sure.
about politics. And to the extent that a bunch of folks are running who have their scripted lines and their sound bites and their Twitter feeds are run by their communication staff and they're not tweeting themselves, I think those people are going to have a harder time in the nomination than people who sound like they believe what they are saying. Obama was just talking about this. When we worked on speeches together, I tried to make sure that what I really believed to be true about a policy, about where the country was headed, about where we need to go, it was something that came from me. And he's like, and maybe you helped me write it, and you helped shape the words, but it came from inside. And I think that if you're running for president, 2 questions you have to ask yourself. Why me? Why now? What do I have to offer this country at this moment in history? And why is it different than what everyone else has to offer?
Well, that leads me to this question. I think there are 2 basic schools of thought right now.
Mm-hmm.
There is, we are going to take the high road and present a Superman, and there is, does it take a Trump to beat a Trump?
Yeah.
And that is why I think a lot of people are looking at Avenatti and saying, hold on, this guy looks like a Trump.
Right.
This is a guy, every criticism you hear from Democrats about Avenatti, you will have heard from Republicans about Trump when he first announced the nomination. This guy is a media whore. This guy is only in it for the headlines. This guy's saying whatever he wants to say, basta, all that.
Yeah.
Are we seeing a little bit of a similarity between them?
So I think if you ask most people, do you want a presidential candidate and a president who's going to fight? Most people will say yes. But I think that the word fight can be defined in a couple different ways. I think if the Democratic nomination is a contest between a bunch of candidates who are trying to compete to see who can deliver the best anti-Trump tirade and who can attack Trump the best, I don't think those candidates are going to do that well, because I don't think people just want someone to stand up there and say all the awful things about Trump that they can. People have pretty much made up their minds about what they think about Donald Trump. What people want is someone who's going to fight really hard, on behalf of the American people, on their behalf. And so they don't want someone to be timid. They don't want someone to be cautious, right? But they want someone to say, I'm going to go fight like hell to make sure that everyone has health care, for Medicare for all. I'm going to fight like hell for gun control. I'm going to fight the gun lobby. I'm going to fight the insurance lobby. I'm going to fight those. They don't want people to just go out there and fight Donald Trump. Because, and look you can see this in Democratic campaigns all across the country right now, including, ideologically different campaigns, right? Ayanna Pressley just won in Massachusetts. She took on Michael Capuano, who's a longtime incumbent, and she's very progressive, abolish ICE, left side of the spectrum, and you'd think, this is someone who must have spent her campaign attacking Donald Trump and fighting as hard as she could.
But alas.
And her people said, no, actually, she fought like hell for issues and for values, and in fact, she would say often on the campaign trail, which is what Barack Obama said in today's speech, Donald Trump is a symptom of a larger problem in this country. He is not the cause. And I think the person and the candidate who can tap into that message, that it's not just Donald Trump, that once Donald Trump goes away, we will still have these really big problems in this country that have been growing for decades. And someone's got to fight to solve those problems. And that fight's going to require not just attacking Donald Trump, it's going to require attacking a whole bunch of powerful interests out there. And I think that the person who can focus on that kind of message is going to do really well.
So are we getting Beto 2020 or not? Do we have to send letters? Do I have to make him a cake?
I mean, let's try to get him through the Senate race first. He's
That's
got
interesting.
it's going to be tough. But if anyone can beat Ted Cruz and win in Texas, it is Beto O'Rourke. And if he falls short, it means that we just weren't there yet in Texas. But I don't know if I don't predict things anymore. I don't know what I believe about his chances, but I believe in him, and I haven't believed in a candidate for a long time.
Well, you're doing the rent is too damn high party a really bad thing when you say that. That guy, what's his name again?
Oh yeah, I forgot. See, I already forget now.
Jimmy McMillan.
Oh, there you go.
Jimmy McMillan, make America not too damn high again. Speaking of make America not too damn high again, how do you feel about candidates who are going out there and saying they do not want to legalize recreational marijuana, but are taking money from the big pharma industry? Do you think that shows some sort of sellout? Do you think that it's appropriate to take money from pharmaceuticals?
Yeah, see, I would separate the issues. I think, I would favor legalizing recreational marijuana, especially decriminalizing marijuana. I think it's ridiculous. I would also advise candidates who are running, say that don't take money from the pharmaceutical industry. Don't take money from the insurance industry. One of the benefits of technology and media and everything that we have in 2018 right now is, and we've seen this with Beto, we saw this with Obama back in 2008, you can raise the money you need, even for a presidential campaign, with low dollar donations from the grassroots, from people sending in $20, $25, $50 from all across the country because you have this wider reach. And this idea that the only way that we can fight Republicans and their billionaires is by sucking up a lot of money from Wall Street and from the pharmaceutical industry, from the insurance industry, is just wrong. And, I've fought with people about this. People are like, oh, well, we can't fight with one hand tied behind our back because they got all these billionaires. Well, Andrew Gillum in Florida was outspent.
No, I was.
How many? Yeah, by a lot in that primary.
He was the bottom when it comes to spending. I certainly know that.
Yeah.
And Andrew Gillum had a very impressive campaign. He was running against Mayor Phil Levine and Gwen Graham.
Right.
And I really, really, really did not think Gillum would pull through there. I saw that Gwen Graham had the lead. She was so off my radar during that election just because I was so not interested in Gwen Graham getting the nomination that I forgot that she was going to be such a heavy hitter. I thought it was going to be Levine.
Who did you like in that race?
You see, that's an interesting question because
it sort of snuck up on me too. I had some friends in politics who really liked Gwen Graham. I had some other friends who really liked Andrew Gillum, kept talking about him.
Well, there wasn't anybody in that race who made me say this is the future of our country.
Mm-hmm.
Gillum made me excited.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like all of Gillum's policy, but I also understood that a lot of Gillum's policy would not affect would not bother Florida. For example,
Right.
I'm not an abolish ICE guy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm offer a complete overhaul to ICE because if you look what's going on there, there are simple changes that need to be made that are very intense. But you also see that they are getting a lot of people out of our country who are proven to have malicious intent.
Right.
But I also know that Andrew Gillum is not going to abolish ICE. But that being said, as governor, he might be better for sanctuary cities,
Right.
which I think is a very good thing. So that made me very excited. So I'd say Gillum was my favorite in that race, but I also would say that if Gillum was in a presidential primary, I might not be as immediately interested in him.
Mm-hmm.
And in regards to Putnam and DeSantis, look, I'll take DeSantis over Putnam. I think anybody would take DeSantis over Putnam. Did you hear about Putnam's computer password issue?
No.
So
I don't know anything about Putnam.
Oh golly!
Just they use the establishment dude that lost.
So when he was in charge of the agriculture department in Florida, for lack of more eloquent words, he forgot the password to one of the accounts that was used to register gun owners, and I forget exactly how many, but over 100,000 illegal guns were sold.
Oh my god!
And that's because he forgot a password.
Holy shit!
Now this happened to me in 2005 with Webkins. I don't know if you're familiar with that game. It was a computer game, but that was just my older brother taking all my stuff and giving it to him, not any guns being sold. So Putnam is just a joke.
So he's bad.
But and DeSantis reminds me a lot of a Democrat running when Obama was president, because a lot of the Democrats in the midterms when Obama was president said, "Hey guys, see what's going on over there? I'm gonna do that.
Mm-hmm.
I am the Obama guy. I'm just going to do whatever Obama tells me to do, and I'll do whatever Obama says." And I was about to criticize DeSantis for just saying, "I'm going to do what Trump does." But then I remembered that that's what people do when there's a president. So while I'm certainly no fan of DeSantis, I'll take him over Putnam, specifically because he is the only one in the entire Florida governor race who said that they would immediately remove Sheriff Israel from Broward County. Now, Broward County is one of the most corrupt places I have ever seen. There are some horrible things going on with the school board. We had a school board member who, after our school year, said that this was an amazing year, which I just...
Weird.
Which is just... I don't even know what to say.
Quite a
there.
thing to say.
Now, you can go out there and say, this was the horrible things happened this year, but we intend to make our educational program strong, and we're proud of all the progress we've made. There's plenty more to go. But no, it was an amazing school year, and that kind of reflects on a lot of the problems in Broward, but that's beside the point. This is going to be an interesting race.
Yeah.
Because I feel like the Gillum-DeSantis race is significant of something larger, which is, can a Democratic socialist like Gillum continue to pull through? It's similar with the Ocasio-Cortez race.
Yeah. And he's not even a Democratic socialist. He's just Democrat with, more progressive position.
He's a Democratic socialist. Like the socialist part is whispered, but if you look at his platform, it's difficult not to loop him in with that movement. And there's nothing wrong with being part of that movement. But
well, I think the Democratic. I mean, that's a whole other conversation. But Democratic socialist has sort of been ill-defined. And what's the difference? We've tried to ask a couple people that, and Levitt asked Ocasio-Cortez in one of our interviews, and the difference between Democratic socialist and a very liberal or progressive Democrat is sometimes fuzzy, sometimes it's not.
You see, I generally would consider myself more of a liberal than a Democratic socialist. From what I've seen of Democratic socialists, it seems like socialism with more steps. And I think Karl Marx hit the mark right on some really good things, but a lot of that might not be where we're headed for our country right now.
Great.
But I also haven't passed chemistry yet, so we'll see. I would like all of our listeners to remember that my opinion, I am eyes through which you can look at an argument, and you should not take anything I say too seriously.
That's basically how we started our whole podcast.
No,
so you're a perfect podcast host.
Exactly. I was about to ask, what made you start Crooked Media? And I know it's easy for people. I've talked to people about Crooked Media. My mother's a tremendous fan of yours. And a lot of people said, oh, it's because Trump got elected and they needed to make their own media platform, but I feel like there's more to that.
Yeah, because way before Trump was elected, even before he was a candidate, John Lovett and Tommy Vitor, Dan Pfeiffer, me, we were all big media critics when we were in the White House. And we weren't just media critics in the sense that, like, oh, the media is attacking Obama for this or that, and so we're annoyed with them. We sort of looked at it and thought, the way that political news is delivered right now is not very informative. It's very sensational.
Subjective.
It focuses on the trivial. You got a bunch of people on cable news yelling at each other all the time. You've got some really fantastic journalism, long-form journalism. You got some fantastic reports in the New York Times, the Washington Post, and even Jake Tapper. There's people on cable news and on network news who are fantastic reporters. But the structure itself of how political news is delivered is neither informative enough or entertaining enough. And so, and that matters in a democracy because, our goal is to make sure that, this generation is involved in paying attention to politics, and they're not going to do that if they turn on their television and there's 8 heads in 8 different boxes on CNN just like screaming the shit at you. They're going to turn away from politics. And so we had been talking for a long time, like, is there some kind of alternative media structure that where you could inform people, but you could also entertain them and not take yourself too seriously? And the most important part is give people a sense that you can do something about the news that you see. Because I think one of the biggest problems with news, and especially political news right now, is it leaves you feeling helpless.
Absolutely.
And so you turn on the news, especially like the nightly news, or local news, and for a half hour it's robberies, killings, car crashes, something bad that happened in the country, something awful Trump did, Republicans and Democrats yelling at each other, being corrupt, being whatever, and then here's the weather, here's sports, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, that sucked.
Yeah, they say, the whole world is burning down, and you walk outside and, there are flowers growing.
Right, yeah.
There are big problems in our country right now, but maybe it's not as bad as people say.
Well, and there are huge challenges, and we do need to get involved, but I think the news can often leave you feeling helpless. And so all this kind of came together. So we'd been thinking about this for a while, and then we had the opportunity to do a political podcast during the 2016 race that Bill Simmons at The Ringer offered us. And so we did this political podcast while we were all doing other things, sort of as a hobby. And we thought, okay, Hillary Clinton's going to win, and then, we'll continue this podcast as a hobby maybe. Maybe we won't. We'll see what happens. And then, I remember when, after Trump won and, John and Tommy and I were doing a live stream at the Ringer Studios, and we were devastated, and we went home after the election. We sort of stayed up all night talking about it, being upset. And then the next day, we had to drive back to the Ringer to do a live stream pod after the election. And we're driving in Lovett's car down Sunset Boulevard, and he hadn't put gas in the car in a long time. So the car breaks down on Sunset and out in front of the CNN building.
Oh, perfect.
And so we are in front of the CNN building, pushing Lovett's car down Sunset with images of Donald Trump all over the news talking about his big election win. And at that moment, when we were at our lowest, we sort of all looked at each other and were like, we got to do something about this. And for people who had already been in politics, it's like, we don't want to go back to D.C. We don't want to just jump on a campaign again. Let's take this idea we've had for a long time about a new kind of media company, a new kind of political media company, and start it ourselves. And we'll see what happens. And we never thought we'd be podcasters. Maybe originally when we thought about a new kind of media, we thought it would be television or something like that. But the podcast thing worked out, and Crooked Media was born.
Look at that.
Yeah.
Well, I got to ask. This is a touchy question for really anyone in the world.
Oh, okay.
In a huge victory this week for a lot of people in Chicago, Mayor Rahm Emanuel said that he is not going to be running for re-election.
Yeah.
Is this something that you may rejoice in, or are you going to miss him?
So, look, I worked with Rahm in the White House. I will tell you, my experiences with Rahm are personal experiences working with him. And my first impressions were, I had heard David Axelrod and Obama and all the folks from Chicago talk about how great Rahm was. And when we get to the White House and he was chief of staff, I will say that, the Obama campaign in 2008 was this sort of no-drama campaign and very collegial, and people didn't really yell at each other that much.
Did you guys ever call yourself No Drama Obama?
Once in a while, yeah. And everyone really sort of got along, and it was sort of calm and chill, and Obama's famous for his cool. And Rahm is not famous for his cool, for keeping his cool or keeping chill. And so, my early interactions with Rahm were him screaming something and yelling about something. And, after a while, it got better, and, I ended up having a good rapport with him. But look, I think I'm not close to politics in Chicago. I don't, I'm not going to sit here and judge every step he made. I'm also not going to defend every decision he made either, because I've been in politics and I wasn't there. So I don't know Rahm's side of the story, and I don't know the other side of the story. But I think that a key in politics is knowing when to walk away. And I think a lot of politicians stay too long past when they should have left. And I think Rahm is smart enough, knowing Rahm as I do, to know that this was the time to leave the scene.
Sure, and it was a fine decision. What? Anyway, to wrap up our conversation here, I gotta ask you. I say I gotta ask you a lot.
You don't have to, but
no, that's it. Yeah, exactly. There's no urgency.
if you want to ask me, yeah.
I elect to ask you.
Yeah.
You know, in regards to that feeling you had of helplessness, not even helplessness, but that abysmal feeling that after President Trump was elected, we can't go anywhere. Let's flash forward a couple months.
Yeah.
The blue wave, hypothetically, doesn't happen. Now,
Mm-hmm.
I'm expecting in many ways the blue wave to happen, and in many ways the blue wave not to happen. I think that it's a very general concept.
Right.
But hypothetically, the Republicans keep everything. If you had to tell our listeners, and I have no idea my demographic, this could be anybody. If you had to tell this invisible person what the next step is for them, what they can do to keep their hope, and again, this is a very hypothetical situation, what would it be? How do you take a situation where you feel like there's nowhere to go and just keep on chugging through?
You have two choices if that happens. One choice is to say, I am so upset by this, I am so disappointed, I am so disheartened that I am going to give up. I'm not going to pay attention to politics anymore. I'm not going to go to the next march. I'm not going to register more voters. And you can make that choice. And if you make that choice, if everyone makes that choice, there's 100% guarantee that all the bad things that we don't like to see happen in politics will keep happening because we are now not involved and we're not in the arena. Or you can decide, something awful just happened, and I've been incredibly disappointed. But the only chance we have to make things better is to keep going and to keep fighting and to keep marching and to keep working at it.
No, I already have chills.
But I'm saying, and that is, and Obama said this today, that is the story of American history. The civil rights movement took 10 years or more, and even after that, it wasn't. We're still fighting it today, and it took people, getting beaten and dying on the Edmund Pettus Bridge and sitting at lunch counters and thinking about the sweep of history and how much disappointment and heartache and even violence in this country people have had to endure in order to bring about progress. When you really think about sort of the totality of American history, you realize the only way that things get better, that we make progress, is if we just keep at it even under the worst circumstances. And so, as disappointing as it might be if the blue wave doesn't come, we really have no choice but to persevere if we hope to bring about the progress that we want.
John, I don't know if this last question is going to make it into the cut. This is more of a personal thing, but
Sure.
we might keep it in just for fun.
Mm-hmm.
So, a New York Times op-ed comes out about Jon Favreau from Crooked Media.
Mm-hmm.
This comes from somebody inside the Crooked office that has a lot to say about Jon Favreau.
Yeah.
And it's a hit piece. It rips you apart, slams you for everything you do. Who wrote it?
I walk over to Lovett's desk.
Okay, I was expecting that. Everybody, this is Jon Favreau. His new movie, Iron Man 2, comes out in 2010.
Check it out.
Thanks a lot, man.
Thanks.
Wow,
Good stuff.
Sound is weird once you take that.
I know.
That was great.
Thanks a lot, man.
Who else have you had so far?
Sean Spicer and Ben Shapiro.
Really?
Welcome to the club.
Oh, man.
Next week is Avenatti. And then we've got Guy Benson.
Oh, my favorite.
We're planning something.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, but again, Shapiro.